Welcome to Lesson 3. In Lesson 2, we looked at ourselves and what we offer. We looked at our product or service and the details that made it special. We created this list of the most important features, all the things that make our product or idea sing. And then we even looked at our company. We looked at ourselves to think about all the other things we can bring to the party. We're going to use all that later. But this is a magic moment. This is the moment we forget about ourselves and we forget about what we want. We forget even about the anxiety of wanting someone to do something that we want them to do. Because thinking about ourselves right now is just going to get in the way. It's going to slow us down from creating the most persuasive possible story in the least amount of time to get people to do what we want. So let's dive into Lesson 3, Pick Your Audience. This subtitle is real. If this were a one-on-one coaching session about some big presentation or some big deliverable or brochure, my first question to you would be, who is your audience? And in this lesson, and in the next one, picking your audience and understanding your audience, we will talk about the best way to prove to people that doing what we want them to do is in their best interest, their own best interest. And along the way, we're going to prove that to ourselves too. And that'll make us more confident. It's going to make us more trustworthy. And that will make us more persuasive. So let's go. Let's start with something that seems obvious, but causes a ton of heartache when people get off on the wrong track. What is an audience? We are talking about the people we want to persuade. That's obvious, right? We're talking about the people who can make our business better and our life better, but only if they do what we want. And we don't want to trick anyone. We don't need to trick anyone. We need them to realize that doing what we want is absolutely in their best interest. And this is easy if and only if we think about what our audience needs. We think about what our audience wants. We are defining the group that needs what we offer and is willing and able to pay for it. We're defining the group that needs what we offer and is willing and able to pay for it. Now, don't get wrapped around the axle about whether your idea is good enough. Even if we haven't met yet, I will bet dollars to donuts it is. I've gone through this process with every client I've had for nearly 20 years. And I've found that when smart people, and you are surely in that group, work hard to create something of value, there are people who need it. We just need to target those people and give them a persuasive story that is built around them. Now, when I say audience, it doesn't matter whether we're literally talking about 100 people sitting in the same room, listening to a presentation, 100 people that are all breathing the same air, 100 people that are all drinking from the same coffee machine. That's the classic view of an audience, right? But we might be talking about a very different kind of audience. We might be talking about an audience of individuals that are reading your email alone in their respective offices who just happen to have the same needs. We've got to think in advance about what our audience has in common. You've probably heard the old saying, there's never enough time to do things right, but always enough time to do things twice. Skipping this step in this lesson, not defining an audience, not thinking in advance about who you're talking to, is a guaranteed formula for having to do things twice. I promised you from the beginning, this approach will be your fastest path to a persuasive story anytime you want someone to do something, right? I said I generally keep things simple by using words like buying and selling that sort of assume you want your audience to buy something because it's the most common request I get. But I promised this approach would work in other cases too, right? So what if I want somebody to do something that has nothing to do with buying anything? What if I wanted someone to say, conserve water or vote for a certain candidate or mow their lawn so the neighborhood looks better? None of those things are about paying for anything, right? It turns out situations that seem really different on the surface just aren't all that different. We have to understand what people want or need because it's that want, it's that need that's going to motivate them to take action. And if they aren't already doing what we want, then they must have some reason. They might have some resistance to it. When we're selling something, we understand that resistance very well. It's simply the resistance to the action of taking money out of their pocket and giving it to you. Every one of us has a little of that resistance. We need to make sure that there's other kinds of resistance also. So, once we realize that all we're doing is asking someone to do something they aren't already doing, everything gets a lot easier. We are still connecting with their needs. We are still making sure they need something we offer. Instead of asking whether they're willing to pay for it, we're just asking, are they willing and able to do what we need? What is needed? Let's look at an example. Let's say we want people conserving water. They have to take short showers. They have a lawn that isn't as green as it used to be. These are real costs to a whole lot of people. It's a cost that's as real as taking money out of their pocket to buy a product from you. So for a group to be your audience, to get them to conserve water, you're still going to have to start with their needs. For some people, maybe that need is simply that your city or your town or your state, that it has sufficient water supply so their faucets don't run dry. Well, that would be pretty compelling. For other people, maybe you need enough water in the rivers and streams so that the salmon can survive and they can come in and lay their eggs. Either way, you need to understand those needs. And to be a viable, this is willing and able part, right? To be a viable water conservation audience, they have to be willing and able to cut back on water after they get convinced by your persuasive story. In the same way, there will always be people who don't buy what you're selling. There may always be people who don't conserve water or do the other things we might like. I always say persuasion may feel like magic sometimes, but it's not some cheap magic trick. My promise to you is to give you the best chance to persuade your audience to do what you want. So it's also my job to tell you that by treating people who are not willing and not able to do what you need, and by investing in those people and communicating with them and trying to persuade those people that will never do the thing that you need them to do, you're hitting your head against a wall. So we're going to find that audience, find the audience who needs what you offer and is willing and able to do what's needed to get it. With that obsession, you and your business will thrive. There's always a chance to circle back with even the most obstinate people. Even in this example, if the entire neighborhood agrees to have a brown lawn and there's one holdout with a house surrounded by this pretty green lawn, suddenly you've got a new need to connect with, right? The need to be part of a community. There are options. There are almost always options. My goal is to give you the best chance, keep you from hitting your head against the wall. So find that audience who needs what you can offer and is willing and able to take the action you want. Picking an audience demands an answer to another critical question. How do you know when two people are really in the same audience? How do you know if you can talk to both people with one story or when you need to adjust the story and have two variations? Now, why is this a big deal? Why do we care? Because getting it wrong hurts a ton either way. Let's look at that. If two people are in different audiences and they care about different things, and we don't realize that, and we try to use that same story with them, same story with both people, but they're really different, they care about different things, it's going to fall flat. It's probably going to fall flat for both of them and it's not going to work. What about the opposite, right? What if two people are in the same audience and they care about the same things, but we don't realize that and they think we've got to have a different story for each of them? The answer is simple. We just do too much work. I hate that. Too much work creating the story, too much work remembering the story. I hate having to remember too many things, and the sales and marketing people that I usually train on the story, they hate having to remember things. So I am super motivated to get it right. I'm super motivated to know whether two people are in the same audience. We want a really simple answer to this not so simple question: when are two people in the same audience? It took me years of doing this before I got the answer down to one sentence, and it's this: two people are in the same audience if they have the same problems and talk about those problems in the same way. This is critical to creating a story that works. It makes life really easy when we get it right, and we shoot ourselves in the foot when we get it wrong. So one more time. When are two people in the same audience? They have to have the same problems, same desires, same needs, same problems, and talk about those problems with the same language. They talk about those problems in the same way. If they do that, guaranteed one story is going to work for both of them. If you get this wrong, or you just don't want to think about it, you're going to do way more work and you're going to have way worse results. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a serious war story example that I ran into where the result was weird and surprising, and it was a darn good thing we got it because it was a major success, but only because we got it right. My client made, not going to give you the details here, it doesn't matter to you, but they made a giant expensive equipment that's part of every company's computer system. Let's just put it that way. It's part of the computer system. It doesn't really matter exactly what the part is, just that every big company, literally every big company, needs this kind of equipment, and lots of vendors make their own version. My client's advantage was really simple. Their stuff ran faster. Their products ran faster. So before we met, they would walk into a big company and they'd say, "Hi, our product runs faster. Do you want to buy it?" And after some early growth, when they were first inventing their fast product, their sales went flat. They had flat sales, almost zero growth for 3 years. My job was simple. My job was to fix that. And it was kind of a mystery because people who owned their products really liked their products, but new people just kind of weren't that interested. So I did the obvious. I had a few conversations with people who buy and use their systems, and here's where it got really interesting. I was talking to technical people in different industries with almost identical jobs. One worked in the big pharmaceutical industry, people that make drugs, people that make medicines. These are companies that you know, companies like Johnson & Johnson or Merck or Pfizer. You've probably heard some of their names. The other group worked in the high-end animation industry. So think Pixar or DreamWorks, the people that do these great movies like Toy Story or special effects for movies like The Avengers. And I'm telling you, the jobs were identical. The people I was talking to, their jobs were identical all the way down to buying the same products from the same computer and networking companies. Totally the same. The people I'm talking about are so similar that if a person working at this job in pharmaceuticals could leave on a Friday and go to work doing the same thing in an animation company on Monday and be productive by lunchtime. So it seemed obvious, right? They have to be the same audience. Turns out, no. I needed a totally different opening story, and here's why. As you may already know, pharmaceutical companies make more money if they get their drugs to market sooner. When they get drugs to market sooner, they get more time under what's called patent protection, which just means nobody else can make the same drug. With more time under that patent protection where no one else can make the same drug, they have more years when they are the only game in town. And no surprise, they can, and they do, charge a lot more for the drugs during that period. That's when they make the billion-dollar profits. So they are obsessed with time to market. Get that drug to market faster. In the animation industry, remember, we're talking about people with identical jobs using identical equipment. In animation, the deadline on when the movie has to be done is written in stone. So if you are late, you are dead. But getting done faster, getting done early, doesn't help anybody. So what do animation folks care about? Awesome, gorgeous effects. Academy Awards. It is all about quality. How do you get quality? You get quality by letting your amazing artists, and by the way, you see these people in action, they are incredible. To let these amazing artists who do animation do 7 revisions of the princess's hair or the breaking in half of the Titanic, they do 7 revisions instead of 3. Simple as that. That's how you get quality. It gets better and better and better and better. You can do 7 revisions instead of 3. You're going to have better quality. You can talk to an animation person about time to market until you are blue in the face and you will get nowhere. And you can talk to a pharmaceutical person about quality and they'll think you're from Mars. Again, remember, the job of these folks is identical, but the problems are totally different. And the way they talk about their problems, the language they use is totally different. So we needed 2 stories. The roots were identical, the equipment's identical, the people are identical, but we needed 2 stories. The truth is those stories are incredibly similar. I made sure that the sales and marketing teams that I was training, they could learn that difference in one sitting, probably in about 10 minutes. But those 10 minutes would be the difference between success and failure. So don't jump over this most basic part. Pick your audience and know who is in that audience. And know that 2 people are in the same audience if they have the same problems and they talk about those problems in the same way. So what about you? Do you have to pick an audience right now as you take this course? The short answer is not necessarily. You can learn this approach now and you can apply it the next time you're trying to convince someone of something. But my guess is you'll remember more and you'll get more out of this if you at least have someone in mind, something that you want that person to do. So right now, take a moment. Picture someone that you'd like to convince to do something. Someone or some group that matters to you. And from now on, we're going to keep calling that person your audience. You can change it later, but have something in mind. Picture something that you want this person to do. Now, this can be anything from buying your product or joining your club or saving water or losing weight, protecting endangered tigers, whatever it is. But if you have someone in mind doing something you want, everything we talk about will end up feeling just more real, more memorable. Now, while I encourage you to try these techniques that we're going to go through as we discuss them, and also say, don't get too bogged down worrying about final version of anything as you take the course. This is about learning an approach and making it second nature after using it a few times. That's the goal, right? To give you a dependable, easy, reliable way to build a story to get your audience to do the thing you want. So if you have an audience in mind, great. That's going to help. Either way, take some notes, try this in your business so you can start to feel it in your bones. I hope you're convinced that defining your audience matters, but just in case, how about one more war story, all right? I had a client that was filled with really smart people. They had a small but multinational company with an office in the East Coast, plus they had sort of large non-US office. For this war story to make sense, I have to tell you a little bit about what they did, and it's just this. Their system made it easy to find the right person to call when an emergency happened, all right? Nowadays, this is called something like knowledge management, a field of software, but in their case, it was just about finding the right person to call in an emergency. When they came to me, they told me they knew their audience. Their ideal audience was a manufacturing plant. They decided, by just thinking about things without ever really talking to anyone in that audience, they decided that when a manufacturing line goes down, the cost is super high. That when the line goes down, you can't make anything, the cost becomes really high. And so they were sure that any manufacturing company would pay a lot to quickly know who to call when the line goes down so they get the problem fixed and they can start making stuff again. I pushed back a bit because selecting your audience is important. And it's so important that I created this lesson about it. So if picking your audience is important, maybe you should do a little bit of homework to make sure that you understand what people need. But they didn't want to do any homework. They didn't want to pay me to do any homework for them. That's for sure. They were dead set on just asking me to figure out exactly what to say to manufacturing customers to get them to buy their product. It seemed like one of those moments when you say, okay, the customer's always right, and I took the project. This happened quite a few years ago, and by the way, I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't do it again, but this story is still really painful. Like, I really still feel this even as I tell you this. To make a long, kind of agonizing story short, I used the technique, this exact technique, the technique we're going to cover in the next lesson to understand the needs of this super focused audience, and then I had to make a presentation to the entire executive team. And I told them, I've got good news, and I got bad news. The good news is, they were right! Manufacturing people absolutely need to solve this problem. They were exactly right. When a manufacturing line goes down, the problem is big and it is expensive. So manufacturing teams needed to find the right person to solve the problem. That was the good news. In fact, that was great news. What's the bad news then? The bad news is this problem is so critical to these manufacturing customers that they had found a way to solve it 20 years ago. And not only were they not going to buy a new product to solve a problem they'd already solved, they definitely were not going to pay the wildly expensive version that this company wanted to sell them. By not thinking about their audience, by not doing just that basic enough homework to find out whether their audience actually needed what they wanted to sell, what they could offer, and whether their audience was willing and able to pay for it, they had defined themselves into a dead end. I take no joy in telling you they were out of business within 6 months. I need to make this really clear. The problem they were trying to solve has become a massive global industry. They had a unique twist on how to solve that problem, and they could have been extremely successful. Their product was good enough. An audience for it did exist. They didn't bother looking for it, so they died. Don't follow their footsteps. Picking an audience doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to take a long time, but you just got to make sure that basic line, people who need what you offer and are willing and able to pay for it or do what you need to get what you've got. And with that, congratulations. You know your audience, or at least you know how you're going to pick your audience. And when you do, you really will have a brand new relationship. You're going to be paying attention to and figuring out how to give value to people who need you as much as you need them. Explicitly defining the people who are in our audience, knowing what they need, knowing what you offer, knowing what they need to do to be willing to get what you offer. That brings us to the end of this lesson. My guess is you probably have an audience or two in mind. I'm hoping you've already thinking about that. As your company grows, you're going to have more. You're going to have customers, you're going to have investors, you're going to have partners. You might even start to have internal audiences like salespeople or other employees. These same steps are the ones that are going to carry you to your most persuasive story for every one of those audiences. While your audience is still top of mind, let's go straight into the next lesson. We're going to dig into how to connect with your audiences and a few simple steps that are going to make sure that you've got this persuasive story that give your ideas the best chance of winning. Come on over to the next lesson. I'm going to be waiting for you.